If you like our short stories, please like, comment and subscribe. Elysia's heart hammered in her chest as the shadowy figure loomed closer, its form flickering in and out of focus like a mirage in the darkness. The air around her crackled with dark energy, and for the first time since she had turned the time-turner, Elysia felt truly powerless. The weight of her mistake, of the chaos she had unleashed, seemed to hang in the very air, suffocating her. She had been on a journey to change history, but now it felt as if history was changing her, twisting her into something she didn't recognize. The figure's voice was low, a chilling whisper that seemed to echo in every corner of the void. You've come to fix it, but you're too late. Time has already been altered beyond repair. What you've set in motion cannot be undone. Elysia's mind raced. No, she whispered, the word feeling like a lifeline. I can fix it. I have to. The figure tilted its head, the edges of its cloak swirling like smoke. Its presence was unnerving, like the very darkness itself had taken shape. You think you can? Every choice you've made has only made things worse. You cannot rewrite time, Elysia. Time is not a book to be edited. It is a river, flowing forward, and when you try to turn it back, it simply drowns you. Elysia took a step back, her eyes darting around the swirling darkness. There had to be a way. There had to be some part of this that she could fix. She had seen what would happen if she failed. She couldn't let the timeline collapse. She couldn't let everything slip through her fingers. The figure's voice grew louder, more forceful. You've already seen the future. My future. You think you can change it? You think you can undo what has been done? Its cloak billowed like a storm as it stepped closer, a dark force that made the void tremble. You cannot stop what is already in motion. You cannot stop me. I can stop it, Elysia said, her voice tight, as she tried to summon the courage she had used all this time. She couldn't back down now. I have to try. The figure tilted its head further, its dark eyes glowing with an unsettling light. You think you can fight against time itself? The universe is not a thing to be shaped by one's whims, and now, because of your foolishness, everything is unravelling. Elysia's heart clenched as she realised just how far the consequences of her actions had reached. Time wasn't just an abstract concept anymore. It was tangible, alive, fragile, and far more dangerous than she could have imagined. It was as if the very air around her was suffocating under the weight of what she had done. And the figure, this embodiment of her failure, was a dark reminder of how close the world was to collapse. What do you want from me? She demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. You're just a part of the chaos I created, aren't you? If you're a consequence of my actions, then I can fix you. I just need to find the right moment. The figure let out a sound that might have been a laugh, though it was hard to tell in the distortion of the void. You don't understand. I am not a part of your mistake. I am the result of it. Every ripple you've caused has created something darker, something more dangerous. You think you can just reverse it with another wish, another choice? I have to try, Elysia said firmly, her voice shaking with the weight of her resolve. I can't just stand here and let everything fall apart. The figure stepped closer, its form growing larger, more imposing. Then make your choice, it said, its voice suddenly filled with a deep, resonant power. Time is not a thing to be bargained with. It is unforgiving, but you will learn that soon enough. Elysia could feel the darkness closing in, the weight of the timeline's destruction pressing against her. The figure was right about one thing. She couldn't just fix it with a wish or a spell. But that didn't mean she couldn't try. With a deep breath, she focused. The time-turner still hung around her neck, its silver casing pulsing faintly as if it were alive, responding to her determination. She closed her eyes and turned inward, summoning the magic that had gotten her this far, even if it wasn't enough to undo the chaos yet. The familiar warmth of magic began to gather around her, the way it always did when she cast a spell. But this was different. This wasn't about incantations or wand movements. This was about fixing something far more fragile. I won't give up, she whispered to herself. I won't let it end like this. When she opened her eyes again, the void before her seemed to shift. The figure was no longer as close, the oppressive feeling of inevitability receding slightly. She could see the faintest glimmer of light ahead of her, an opening in the chaos. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The choice was hers. Step forward into the unknown, face whatever consequences lay ahead and try to undo her mistake, or turn away and accept the collapse of everything she knew. Elysia didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, determined to find the moment where everything had gone wrong. and this time she was going to make it right. Elysia's heart thudded in her chest as she stepped forward into the faint glimmer of light that had appeared before her. The darkness around her still pressed close, but she could feel the pull of the light, a sliver of hope, a chance to undo the damage. Each step felt like she was walking through an ocean of time itself, a force that stretched endlessly in all directions. It was as if reality itself was bending, folding around her with each movement, pushing her deeper into a place where time no longer flowed the way it was supposed to. The figure remained behind her, its presence still looming like a shadow, but Elysia had no intention of looking back. The moment ahead was all that mattered. She had come this far, had made the decision to face the consequences of her actions, and she wasn't about to stop now. She couldn't. Not when everything she knew hung in the balance. The light ahead grew stronger as she moved forward, revealing a familiar scene. Hogwarts, but different. It was the same grand castle, yet there was something unsettling about it. The sky above was a deep, swirling violet, as though the very heavens themselves were in turmoil. The air was thick with magic, charged with an energy she had never felt before. The castle seemed to hum, the walls trembling under an unseen force. In the distance she saw herself, or rather a version of herself, standing in the courtyard, her hand tightly gripping the time-turner. Elysia froze. The scene before her felt so real, so vivid, that for a moment she could have sworn she was watching a memory, a moment that had already passed. But this wasn't a memory. This was the moment when the timeline had fractured. She watched as her other self raised the time-turner, her face filled with wonder and excitement. The younger Elysia turned it, oblivious to the ripple it would send through time. It was the moment that everything began to change, the moment when her curiosity had tipped the scales and sent the timeline spiralling into chaos. The older version of herself, standing in the shadows, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of sadness and determination. This was the fracture point, the point where history had been disturbed. It was the crux of everything, and now Elysia knew what she had to do. She stepped forward, the air around her humming with power as she approached the younger version of herself. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. She had to reach out, stop her younger self before the time-turner was turned. She had to undo the mistake she had made. But how could she stop herself from making the very choice that had led her here? Her hand reached out, and the world around her seemed to freeze. The young Elysia in the courtyard never noticed the older version approaching. The younger Elysia's fingers hovered over the time-turner, the glow from the device casting an eerie light across her face. The moment was suspended in time, and Elysia realized that she was at a crossroads, not just for the timeline, but for herself. She could stop it. She could stop her younger self from using the time-turner, from making the same mistake. But then what? What would happen to her? To the version of herself that stood here, in this fractured moment, staring at the very choice she had made? Would she cease to exist? Would the timeline correct itself, erasing her entirely from history? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. But it was the weight of the timeline's destruction that made her decision clear. The future, the present, everything would collapse if she didn't act. There was no time for hesitation. The timeline was fragile, like glass, and it would shatter completely if she didn't fix it now. With a steady breath, Elysia reached out, her fingers brushing against the time-turner in her younger self's hand. The younger Elysia froze for a moment, her eyes widening as she turned to face the older version of herself. Who are you?" the younger Elysia whispered, fear and confusion flooding her expression. "I'm you," Elysia said, her voice quiet but filled with purpose. "I'm the mistake you're about to make." The younger Elysia blinked in confusion, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "I just wanted to see the past. Just one turn to witness it. What's wrong with that?" The older Elysia's heart ached at the words. She remembered that feeling, that curiosity, the desire to understand the world in a way that only a time-turner could offer. But now, standing here, she saw the danger in it, the recklessness of tampering with time itself. "You don't understand," Elysia said softly, her voice tinged with regret. "That one turn, it's not just a simple choice. It's going to tear everything apart. You can't see the consequences yet, but I have. I've lived them. This is the moment that will change everything." The younger Elysia shook her head, her grip on the time-turner tightening. "I don't believe you. This is just a chance to learn, to see history." Elysia felt a pang of sadness. She had been there once, thinking the same thing. But now she could see the truth that her younger self couldn't yet understand. "I wish I could tell you everything," Elysia whispered, her hand still hovering over the time-turner. "But you have to trust me. You have to let it go. Time doesn't work like this. You can't control it. There was a long silence, the world around them still, the weight of the decision pressing down on both of them. The younger Elysia's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but the spark of curiosity was still there, the desire to turn the time-turner, to see the past with her own eyes. "I'm sorry," the older Elysia said, her voice breaking, "but you have to stop. You can't make this mistake." And with that, she gently took the time-turner from the younger Elysia's hand. The younger Elysia recoiled slightly as the older version of herself gently took the time-turner from her hand. The older Elysia could feel the younger version's confusion and the sharp sting of betrayal in her eyes. The younger Elysia stood still for a moment, trying to understand what was happening, trying to process the reality that was being thrust upon her. You took it from me," the younger Elysia whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and frustration. She took a step back, clutching her chest, as if trying to hold on to something that had just been ripped away. "Why? I don't understand. I only wanted to see the past." "I know," the older Elysia said quietly, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. "I wanted the same thing, but you don't understand. Seeing the past isn't enough. Time, it isn't something you can control. It's too fragile. You can't just twist it to your will without consequences. We've already seen those consequences." The younger Elysia shook her head, her expression a mix of confusion and defiance. "But what's wrong with that? Everyone's done it. Hermione Granger used a time-turner to go back and attend extra classes, and nothing happened to her. Why should this be different? Why is it such a big deal?" The older Elysia's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of the question, the innocence in her younger self's words. She remembered what it was like to be that young, to believe that magic was the answer to every problem, to think that a single turn of the time-turner could change everything for the better. But now she understood that magic, especially the kind that tampered with time, was dangerous, unpredictable, and it came at a cost that no one could foresee. "Because you're not just going back to learn something, to attend classes," the older Elysia explained, her voice soft but firm. "You're changing the past. Even the smallest change can have a ripple effect. You don't see it now, but everything will fall apart. The future will be altered in ways you can't even imagine. And you're not the only one who will suffer. Everyone will." The younger Elysia's eyes filled with disbelief. But the older Elysia could see the flicker of doubt beginning to form. She could see the seed of realization starting to take root. "What happens if I keep going?" the younger Elysia asked softly, her voice now quieter, more vulnerable. "What if I turn the time-turner anyway?" The older Elysia hesitated. Her heart ached as she looked at the younger version of herself. She knew how tempting it was to give in to that desire, to see the past, to have a second chance. But she had already seen the destruction it would cause, the unravelling of the timeline, the destruction of everything she had known. "If you do," the older Elysia said, her voice breaking, "everything you know will be lost. The future will collapse. The people you care about will be lost. And you won't even remember why you're doing it. You won't understand why everything is falling apart." The younger Elysia looked at her, her eyes wide with fear. She could feel the weight of the older version's words pressing down on her, could sense the gravity of the situation. But there was still hesitation in her eyes, still that spark of curiosity that had brought her here in the first place. "But I want to understand. I want to know. If I don't do this, if I don't see the past, then what?" The older Elysia stepped forward, taking a deep breath as she tried to find the words that would make the younger version understand. "You're not ready to see the past. None of us are. The past is... It's not just a series of events to be witnessed. It's something that shapes who we are. It's something we can learn from, but we can't live in it. We can't let it control us. The past belongs where it is, in the past. The present. This moment. This is where you need to be. You have the power to change things, not by going back, but by moving forward." The younger Elysia looked down at her feet, her fingers still curled tightly around the empty space where the time-turner had been. For a moment she said nothing, her mind clearly working through the implications of what the older Elysia had said. It was clear she didn't fully understand, but there was a part of her, a part that was starting to listen, starting to understand that perhaps this wasn't just about what she wanted, but about what was right. "Will we be okay?" the younger Elysia asked quietly, lifting her gaze to meet the older Elysia's eyes. Will the timeline be okay? The older Elysia swallowed hard, her heart breaking at the question. She knew what she had to do, but it wasn't going to be easy. I don't know. I don't know if we can fix it completely. But we have to try. We can't undo what's been done, but we can stop it from getting worse. The younger Elysia nodded slowly, as if the weight of the decision had finally settled in her mind. She let out a deep breath, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the darkness around them seemed to lift, just a little. The older Elysia held out the time turner, the very device that had caused so much pain, so much chaos. She extended it to the younger version of herself, who hesitated for a moment before accepting it. Promise me you won't use it, the older Elysia whispered, her voice soft but filled with conviction. The younger Elysia looked down at the time turner in her hands, her fingers lightly brushing against the cool silver. She nodded slowly, the weight of the promise settling in her heart. I promise, she said quietly, her voice stronger than before. And with that, the older Elysia knew that for the first time, she had set things right. The timeline was still fractured, but they would move forward together and try to fix it. The air around them seemed to shift, growing lighter, as if the act of making the decision had begun to undo some of the damage that had been done. Elysia stood there watching her younger self, her reflection, holding the time turner still in her hands, yet no longer filled with the same burning desire to turn it. For a moment everything was silent. The castle around them, which had once felt suffocating and uncertain, now seemed quieter, more peaceful. The distant rumblings of time and space that had surrounded them only moments before had faded, replaced by the stillness of a world yet to be completely repaired. But that stillness didn't last long. A shudder ran through the walls, a sharp crack of magic bending under pressure. Elysia's heart skipped a beat. The timeline was not fully healed, far from it, but they had bought themselves time. Time to make things right. Time to move forward. Elysia turned away from her younger self and walked toward the edge of the courtyard, feeling the familiar, comforting weight of the time turner still hanging from her neck. The presence of the device was both a reminder of how close she had come to losing everything, and a symbol of the responsibility she had now taken on. She could feel its pull, the power that had first drawn her in, but now it was something she held with careful awareness. The temptation to go back, to try again, to see. It was always there, lingering at the back of her mind. Are you okay? The younger Elysia asked quietly, breaking the silence. She had approached and now stood just behind her, holding the time turner tightly in her hands. Elysia didn't turn to face her at first. Her thoughts were too scattered, too focused on the lingering remnants of the fractured timeline that still danced in the corners of her vision. The magic of time, of reality itself, was still unstable. It wasn't just about stopping herself from making the same mistake. It was about preventing the collapse of the world they knew. I'm not sure, Elysia admitted softly, turning to meet her younger self's eyes. But we can't fix it alone. We need to make sure we don't fall into the same trap again. The younger Elysia nodded, though uncertainty still clung to her features. It was clear that the weight of their choices had only just begun to settle on both of them. The desire to know, to understand, was still there, but it wasn't the same anymore. There was something deeper now, something that transcended mere curiosity. What happens now? The younger Elysia asked, looking down at the time turner with a new kind of understanding. Now we start moving forward, Elysia said, her voice filled with quiet determination. We don't go back. We don't try to fix everything that's already happened. But we work with what we have, and we make sure the timeline doesn't break any further. She could feel the magic of the timeline settling around them, the air growing thicker again. But this time it wasn't the weight of impending disaster. It was the energy of possibility, the power that came from facing the unknown, from embracing the future rather than trying to rewrite the past. The younger Elysia hesitated, then took a deep breath and held out the time turner. I won't use it again, she said, her voice strong, though it still trembled with the fear of the unknown. But what if it's not enough? What if we can't stop it? Elysia reached out and took the time turner, her fingers brushing against her younger self's hand. The connection between them felt oddly comforting. She could see the uncertainty in the younger version's eyes, the same fear that had once driven her to act recklessly. But now there was something new, hope, a flicker of belief that they could still make a difference. We'll do everything we can, Elysia said, her voice steady. But the timeline doesn't belong to us, it belongs to the world. We have to trust that we're part of something bigger, something we can't control completely. But that doesn't mean we don't have the power to help fix it. The younger Elysia nodded slowly, her gaze shifting from the time-turner to the horizon. "You're right," she whispered. "We can't control everything, but we can still make choices. We can still try." "Exactly," Elysia said, a faint smile crossing her face. "And that's enough." They stood there in silence for a moment, side by side, watching as the world around them began to settle. Hogwarts, though altered, was still standing, still the place that had shaped them, still home. The stars above twinkled faintly, and the night sky, while still tinged with violet, no longer seemed so threatening. The calm was still fragile, but it was real. The younger Elysia let out a soft sigh, the weight of the time-turner no longer pulling her down. She had made the promise not to use it again, and for the first time Elysia could see that she believed it. "I'm ready," the younger Elysia said softly. "To move forward?" Elysia nodded. "Me too." And together they turned away from the fractured moment in time, walking toward a future filled with uncertainty, but also with the hope of redemption. The timeline, while still broken, was not beyond repair. Not yet. As long as they faced forward, as long as they made the right choices, there was still a chance to set things right. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still remnants of the timeline's destruction, still echoes of the chaos that had been unleashed. But they would face it together, one step at a time. And that was enough. The sky above them began to brighten, but it was not the vibrant dawn they were used to. The light had a strange, muted quality, like the world was still recovering from the fractures in time. Elysia took a deep breath, feeling the air shift. Lighter now, but still thick with the magic that had been disturbed. The winds that had raged around the castle had calmed, but there was still a chill that lingered, reminding them both of how close they had come to losing everything. Together, they walked toward the heart of the castle, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The once familiar surroundings felt unfamiliar now, as if time itself had left an imprint on everything. The portraits still hung on the walls, but their eyes no longer followed them. The tapestries that had once danced with colour and life hung still, their fabric faded. Hogwarts was in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the timeline to settle, for the magic to heal. But there was a weight to the silence now, a sense of loss, a reminder that things could never truly return to the way they had been. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," Elysia said softly, as she glanced at her younger self. The time-turner, now a symbol of their shared burden, hung heavily between them, a constant reminder of the power and responsibility they had been entrusted with. The world was fractured, but it wasn't beyond fixing. "Not yet." The younger Elysia, still holding the remnants of the device in her hand, nodded. "I know. But where do we start?" Elysia paused for a moment, looking at the walls, at the shadows that lingered in the corners of the castle. The magic that had been twisted and broken would take time to heal, but they couldn't afford to wait. They had already lost too much. She couldn't let that happen again. "We start by repairing what we can," Elysia said, her voice firm. "We find the points where time was torn, where the fractures started, and we do what we can to fix them. We can't control everything, but we can choose to put things back on the right path." The younger Elysia seemed to consider this for a moment before speaking again. "But what if we don't have enough time? What if we're too late?" Elysia shook her head. "We'll never know unless we try. The past is gone. We can't change it, but we have the present, and we still have the future." The younger Elysia stared at the time-turner, her fingers tracing the edges of the device, her face etched with a mixture of resolve and uncertainty. "What if I'm not strong enough?" she asked quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "What if I can't fix this?" Elysia's heart clenched at the vulnerability in her younger self's voice. She remembered feeling the same way, the doubt, the fear of making the wrong choice. But that was the thing about choice. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about making the right decision when it mattered most, even when you were afraid. "You're stronger than you think," Elysia said, her voice warm and reassuring. She placed a hand on her younger self's shoulder. "We all are. We don't have to do it alone. We're in this together." The younger Elysia looked up at her, and for the first time since they had stepped into this fractured reality, Elysia saw a glimmer of the courage that had first led her down this path. It was small, but it was there, a spark that could still light the way forward. "Together," the younger Elysia repeated, her voice more certain now. "Okay, let's do this." And with that they continued on, moving deeper into the heart of the castle, where the echoes of their actions still reverberated through the halls. The magic that had been disturbed was still present, but now with each step they took, it seemed to shift, to realign itself. They had come a long way from the moment when Elysia had first turned the time-turner, eager to witness history, unaware of the chaos it would cause. Now, standing together with the weight of the past and the future pressing upon them, they knew that their journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. As they moved deeper into the castle, Elysia felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't the peace of a problem solved, but the peace of knowing they had the strength to face whatever came next. They had made their choice. They had decided to move forward. And with that decision came the power to shape their own future. The castle around them, once heavy with the scars of time's fractures, seemed to breathe again. The walls, though still scarred, felt more solid. The air, though still thick with magic, was no longer oppressive. It was as if the very essence of Hogwarts, of the wizarding world, was beginning to heal. Slowly but surely it was mending. Elysia looked over at her younger self, who was walking beside her with newfound determination. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for certain. They would face it together, and that in itself was enough. "We'll find a way to fix it," Elysia said quietly, her words a promise. "One step at a time." The younger Elysia smiled faintly, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. One step at a time. And together they walked forward into the unknown, with nothing but their resolve and the will to make things right. The deeper they ventured into the castle, the more Elysia felt a sense of urgency pressing on her chest. Every corner, every stone of Hogwarts now seemed to hold echoes of their actions. The fractures in the timeline were still fresh, but the ripple of their decision to move forward together seemed to slowly reweave the threads of time, though the fabric was still delicate. The halls, though still dark and filled with the weight of time's unravelling, had a strange air of expectation. The absence of people, of life, made it clear that the timeline had been disturbed in a profound way. The world they had known, the magic that had once been so vibrant and alive, was now quieter, as if holding its breath. Elysia walked beside her younger self, each step feeling like a return to something forgotten, like they were walking into a future that hadn't been decided yet, but which still carried the potential for hope. They had made the choice to stop going back, to focus on moving forward, and in that choice lay the power to repair what had been broken. "How do we even begin?" the younger Elysia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her question was laced with a mix of wonder and fear, as if she was unsure of how to approach the vast responsibility now on their shoulders. Elysia glanced at her, the determination in her heart as strong as ever. "We begin with the present. We can't change the past anymore, but we can act in the present. We can make decisions now that will steer the timeline back on course." They reached a large, grand door at the end of a corridor, the stone heavy with age. The door stood slightly ajar as if waiting for them. The faintest glow seeped from the crack, and it felt like the heartbeat of the castle itself, pulsing in time with the world they had set in motion. "This is it," Elysia said softly, her hand hovering over the door, as if she could feel the magic inside, waiting to be set free. The younger Elysia nodded, her grip on the time-turner tightening slightly, though her face was filled with a newfound resolve. She had come so far, and there was no turning back now. Together they pushed open the door. Inside, the room was vast, with a high ceiling that disappeared into the shadows above. The walls were lined with old, worn bookshelves, each one filled with ancient texts and scrolls. A large stone pedestal stood in the centre of the room, and on it was a glowing orb that pulsed softly with light. The room itself seemed to hum with a strange energy, as if it too was aware of the timeline's fractures. Elysia stepped forward, drawn to the orb, and felt the pull of time itself, bending and stretching in ways she could barely understand. She knew deep down that this was the key. This orb was a focal point of magic, tied to the balance of time. It had been untouched for centuries, its purpose long forgotten, and now it was here, waiting for them to repair what had been broken. "What is this place?" the younger Elysia whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. She stood just behind Elysia, her eyes wide as she took in the room around them. Elysia swallowed hard, stepping closer to the pedestal. "I'm not sure, but I think it's where the threads of time meet. It's where the timeline can be restored, if we can figure out how." The younger Elysia took a cautious step forward. "And how do we do that?" Elysia hesitated for a moment, looking at the orb. It was so simple, so unassuming in its soft glow, yet it held the key to everything. Time, magic, history, it all seemed to converge here. "We have to trust it. Trust that this is the right path. The timeline is fragile, but it's still alive. We can't undo the mistakes we've made, but we can make sure that they don't define the future." She reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the orb. The moment she made contact, a rush of energy shot through her, as if she were connected to every moment in history. She could feel the weight of the past, the ripples of time stretching out before her, and the pull of the future, uncertain but full of potential. The younger Elysia stepped beside her, taking a deep breath. What happens now? The orb began to glow brighter, its light intensifying, as if responding to their presence. We don't control it, Elysia said, her voice calm, but we're part of it, and together we can guide it. For a moment, there was nothing but the soft hum of magic, the vibrations of time itself settling around them. The air felt alive, as if the world was taking a breath. Then, the orb flickered and began to swirl with light, faster and faster, like the unravelling of time itself. Elysia and the younger Elysia stepped back, watching in awe as the light danced in the air, weaving through the room like a thread being pulled by an unseen hand. The walls seemed to breathe with them, the books on the shelves shifting, the shadows dancing with the rhythm of time. The timeline was repairing itself slowly but surely, and they had made it possible. This is it, the younger Elysia whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. It's working. Elysia nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. The timeline wasn't fixed completely, not yet, but it was moving in the right direction. The future, though uncertain, now held the potential for hope. We've done what we could, Elysia said softly. But it's not over. The timeline will still need us, as long as we're alive to shape it. Every choice we make now will matter. The younger Elysia smiled. The weight of the time-turner no longer a burden, but a symbol of their shared journey. Then let's make the right ones. Together they stood before the orb, watching as the timeline began to heal, knowing that their work wasn't finished, but that they had finally taken the first step toward restoring the world they had nearly lost.